Good afternoon, everyone. We are now at the very end of the book of Judges. It is the final chapter where we are going to deal with a very serious matter regarding to the almost obliteration of one of the tribes of Israel, which is the tribe of Benjamin. We recall in the past chapter, in chapter 20, of how many of them have been struck down, and we need to recap that as we go through verse 2. We start with verse 1, and it begins with, now this word noun is, I won't be using it that way. I think the word and, not and then, and it refers to the earlier episode. And that would be in chapter 20, verse 1. When they were all gathered at Mitzpah, the men of Israel sworn an oath at Mitzpah. Now, this word sworn an oath is a very serious affair. This is to swear in the name of God. And I guess this word is shavah. Shavah is to swear in the name of God. And it is a very serious oath, meaning whoever swears the oath, they must honor the oath. And so, in the haste of trying to teach the Benjamin tribe a lesson, they all got together and swore this oath. And the oath says this: none of us shall give his daughter to Benjamin as a wife. Now, this was done in chapter 20, verse 1. And what does that mean? It means that none of us would be none of the fathers who are not from the Benjamin tribe. They will not give his daughter to be married as a wife. Now, this word wife is a modern word. In the ancient days, this is merely a woman. That is the meaning. Like in the old days, the wife will say that no, the husband is her man. And the man will say that his wife is his woman. So basically, the ancient days, people just use man and woman as a depiction of who belongs to them. And so this phrase here is that none of the fathers of the tribes will give his daughter officially as the woman of anyone from Benjamin. That is the oath that they have sworn. Then the people came to the house of God, and this word here is Bethel. And house of God is a good way of expressing it's not the city of Bethel, but really the house of God in Shiloh. Now, why are they there? The people came to Shiloh in a bout of remorse. So, in this chapter, it's to deal with the remorse of acting rashly, acting unjustly, and almost annihilating Benjamin. This is what they need to discuss right now. They remained there before God until evening. They lifted their voices and wept bitterly. These are all actions of remorse. And they said, "O Lord God of Israel, why has this come to pass in Israel, that today there should be one tribe missing in Israel? There cannot be a tribe missing, but it is almost coming to that point." All of them got together in unity to teach the Benjamin tribe a lesson, so much so in the discord, in the zeal to execute justice, created an injustice. We now see in verse 4, and then, this is the word, and then it was on the next morning that the people rose early, built another altar. Notice this is another altar. There is already one, but they are in such a remorse because they didn't know what else to do but to try to appease God, offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. All of this is really a display that they have done unjustly. They are sorry, but they don't know how else to fix the problem. And so now in verse 5, they come to this point and says, the children of Israel said, who among all the tribes of Israel did not come up with the assembly to the Lord? This, by the way, is not about fighting merely, but this is the coming up with the assembly to the Lord. And this is 21 verse 2. This is this idea here, came to the house of God, and who did not come up with them. And so they are now discussing, is there somebody missing here? For they have made a great oath concerning anyone who had not come up to the Lord at Mizpah, and that would be this place here in Mizpah. If they didn't join into the fight, there would be a problem. He shall be put to death. And now they did not come up to this assembly in remorse. And so they are all doubly wrong. Means what? In this verse 2 assembly, it needs to include the others who are not at war. The ones at Mizpah was at war. The ones here at Shiloh in the house of God is not about the war. It's about a remorse, a repentance. And in both cases, somebody didn't show. And the children of Israel grieve for Benjamin, their brother. Now, this word grieve is important. In verse 6, the word here really comes from the word naham, that is regret, remorse, suffer grief. Disappointed. That's all in the same word. And in this case, they are all disappointed about themselves, about what they have done to their Benjamin, their brother. Regardless of what had transpired, there was great evil that was happening in Giva, and they wanted to teach those people a lesson. The rest of the Benjamin tribe did not allow, and so the rest of the tribes went up against Benjamin. I need us now to think through what exactly happened in chapter 21. Now, in chapter 21, if you recall that in chapter 20, verse 2, we are told that there were 400,000 men of the tribes of Israel who were there to go against the Benjamin. Basically, after 2 days, 40,000 were killed. They were going after some 25, 26,000. And this would be in chapter 20, verse 15 to 16. And you find that there were only 26,000 Benjamites. And out of the Benjamites of 26,000, only 600 were left. After all said and done, women and children also died. And so this is about a virtual obliteration of Benjamin, their brother. But they also realized that although they went up against their brother, 10% of their men were killed. That's a high number. To go after 26,000, 40,000 died. And thereby, they were also shown that they have done wrong. That God didn't give the Benjamin into their hands. In fact, the Benjamites were very good warriors. So at the end of the day, only 600 left of Benjamin, but 40,000 killed, and so they were remorseful. Looking at what happened to the Benjamites, they're now saying one tribe is cut off from Israel today. These 600 men that were left have no women to marry, and thereby eventually will grow old and die, and there will be no more children of Benjamin, because they made an oath that none of us shall give his daughter to Benjamin as a wife. And thereby, they are now stuck with this conundrum. This is a dilemma. What shall we do for wives for those who remain, the 600, seeing we have sworn by the Lord that we will not give them our daughters as wives? Because this swearing by God means that they have made an oath in the name of God. They can't break it. If they break it, they die. And so now they are in a catch 22. Verse 8, and they said, do you know what? Is there one from the tribe of Israel who did not come to Mitzpah to did somebody not come to fight with us? The fact that they didn't come to fight with us means that they are standing apart from us. Now, you need to understand this idea of unity of Israel. United to fight, then they will win. Now, there is this one group from Yabesh Gilead. They are from the eastern shore of the Jordan, and apparently they didn't go. So, in fact, no one had come to the camp from Yabesh Gilead to the assembly. For when the people were counted, indeed, not one of the inhabitants of Yabesh Gilead was there. And so they now find fault in Yabesh Gilead because they are in the eastern front of the Israel territory, which is actually east of the Jordan. If these people were not united with the rest of Israel, they could be in alignment with the enemy, which brings them directly into the camps of Israel. So it is important that all the tribes, especially those in the eastern shore of the Jordan, are fully united with the rest of the tribes, because the first entry by the enemies would be via the eastern front. And thereby they have discovered that there is this group from Yabesh Gilead that is guilty. And so the congregation sent there 12,000 of the most valiant men. Now, in the 12,000, we are told that it is 1,000 per tribe. This is to show the unity of the 12 tribes, and commanded them, saying, and you need to pay attention, go strike the inhabitants of Yabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, including women and children. And this was the verdict that is to be passed on Yabesh Gilead, that they have been a disappointment to the 12 tribes of Israel. We are then told that, and this is the thing that you shall do: utterly destroy every male, every woman who has known a man intimately. Now, what this means is this would be every woman who has a child or not a virgin. What is important in the culture then is that through the women of Yabesh Gilead, maybe they'll be able to find a way to rescue the tribe of Benjamin. So, what actually happened now would be that they found among the inhabitants of Yabesh Gilead, and it says here, 400 young virgins who had not known a man intimately. Now, these words in verse 12 are very specific. The word here is Betula, and that is the name word meant for virgin. Never known a man in their lives, and they were brought to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. So what happens is that they are now in Shiloh. They went to Yabesh Gilead, and then they did the what they would call justice of the land. All men, women, and children all died, except for 400 young virgins, and they brought them to Shiloh, the house of God. In verse 13, this word is, and then the whole congregation sent word to the children of Benjamin, who were at the rock of Rimmon, and announced peace to them. This word is to make peace, to call for shalom. And so Benjamin came back at that time, and they gave them the women whom they had saved the life of the women of Yabesh Gilead, yet they had not found enough for them. Why? Because there were 600 Benjamin men. They only found 400 Yabesh Gilead virgins. And so they are short of 200. So what are they going to do? Verse 15, and the people grieved for Benjamin because the Lord had made a void in the tribes of Israel. Now, this idea here, the Lord made a void, is how the ancient Hebrew people speak. It's a manner of speech, actually. Something that we need to pay attention to. This is a manner of speech. Who actually voided the tribe of Benjamin? It wasn't God. It was the 12 tribes. But now when they look at the bigger picture, they now ascribe this to God. And they grieve because it was their hand. And in the eyes of God, this cannot be. 12 tribes must remain, and they must find a way to fix this problem. So now we go to verse 16. In verse 16, it says, and then the elders of the congregation said, what shall we do for wives for those who remain, since the women of Benjamin have been destroyed? And they said There must be an inheritance for the survivors of Benjamin, that a tribe may not be destroyed from Israel. This is a very important lesson that they all must see to it. In verse 17, it is to understand that all the tribes must survive and they must do everything they can to ensure that Benjamin is not lost. However, there is a conundrum, remember? We cannot give them wives from our daughters because of an oath. They swore an oath saying that cursed be the one who gives a wife to Benjamin. So the men of the 12 tribes cannot give of their daughters to the tribe of Benjamin. Then they said this, there is a possibility. And the possibility works this way. In fact, there is a yearly feast of the Lord in Shiloh where they are, which is north of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goes out from Bethel to Shechem and south of Levanah. Verse 20. And so they are now seeing this way to solve the problem. Remember, 600 Benjamin, right? Benjamin men, 400 virgins from Jabesh Gilead, short of 200. And they need to make the difference. And they cannot give of their daughters to the Benjamin men. So in verse 20, it says, and then they instructed the children of Benjamin, and the children of Benjamin here literally means the sons of Benjamin, because we are now talking about the 600 Benjamin men. He says, go and lie in wait in the vineyards and watch. And just when the daughters of Shiloh come out to perform their dances, then come out from the vineyards, and every man catch a wife for himself from the daughters of Shiloh, and then go to the land of Benjamin. Now, this is something that we need to explain. They are there to hide, and we are now talking about these 200, not the 600, because there are already there for 400 of them. Now, the next stage would be to then come out from the vineyard where they are hiding, and every man without a wife, a woman, come and look for one from the daughters of Shiloh. By inference, the Jewish people are looking at this, that these are righteous women. And they belong to the tribes of Israel. But the catch is this. It says here that then it shall be when the fathers or their brothers come to us to complain that they made an oath and they cannot give their daughters to the tribe of Benjamin, we will say this to them. Be kind to them for our sakes, because we did not take a wife for any of them in the war. For it is not as though you have given the women to them at this time, and you are not guilty of your oath. Now, let me explain what really has been done. The fathers or brothers, they did not give. So what really happened was the Benjamin men found their daughters of Shiloh, and it is assumed that they are also virgins and unmarried, having not known a man. And so between the two of them, The daughter must be willing to marry the man. This is not uh, about robbing the family. Although it says catch a wife or snatch a wife, this idea here is to go and grab a girl that you want, but on the understanding, and this is the assumption from the text, that the woman must be willing. If the woman is not willing, then there is no solution, because their fathers and brothers cannot give them in marriage. So it has to be a willing woman to join the Benjamin men to be married to him. And in that case, then they have not broken the oath technically, because the fathers never gave their daughters to be married. The daughters themselves were of the marrying age and decided without their fathers to marry the Benjamin men. That is the solution. And so, what ultimately happened at the end of the day is this, verse 23. And then the children of Benjamin did exactly as they were told. They took enough women for the number of those who danced, whom they caught. Now, this idea of catching is to be seen in a positive sense, because this is the only way to allow the Benjamin men to have a wife without the father's consent. And then they went and returned to their inheritance of the land, and they rebuilt the cities and dwelt in them. This is the way that the 12 tribes of Israel resolved for the 600 men that survived this total injustice. A real moment of madness between the brothers of Israel, that all the tribes would have almost wiped out an entire tribe within them. And so now the 600 Benjamin men has 600 women for wives, and they went to slowly rebuild the tribe of Benjamin, which remained small. As we enter into the next book, that would be the book of First Samuel, and you would find that the smallest tribe provided the king, and that would be Saul, who came from Benjamin. And so this chapter will give you that background, that the tribe of Benjamin was, well, if you look at it that way, rewarded to provide a son of Kish, who is Saul, to be the king of Israel, the first king. So this is the way that the problem was solved, and they solved it together as all 12 tribes. Verse 24. And then, after all these were done, the children of Israel departed from there at that time, every man to his tribe and family. They went out from there, every man to his inheritance. Now remember, this expression, his inheritance, always means land. Always means land. And so the Benjamin went back to their inheritance. The rest of the sons of Israel went back to their inheritance. We now come to the final verse of the book of Judges, and it is very, very telling. It says that in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. This phrase keeps popping out a number of times throughout the book of Judges. There is no central authority. At this point in time, there was no judge. There was no ultimate leader that could invoke a central authority until they had a king. And so that is why it says there was no king in Israel. If there was a king, all these things would not have happened. But there was no king. And so everyone did what was right in his own eyes. The 12 tribes fought with Benjamin. And thereby we find that each of them thought what was right and they just executed. And Benjamin was almost completely obliterated. When we move forward from the book of Judges, that is also the reason why we find that there was a beginning of the prophet and the beginning of kings, so that there was a semblance that the nation of Israel itself can now function in a more governed way rather than just tribal. And so this chapter paves the way into the book of First Samuel to understand why all these things happened when they wanted a king eventually. Because without a king, they couldn't function as 12 tribes. And the grievous mistake they made was in the haste of their emotional judgment, they almost wiped out one tribe. Now, this is a very sad ending to the book of Judges. The last few chapters were really atrocious and really had to teach people a lesson that without a focus, central focus on God, the people were getting unruly out of hand and decided to do what they wanted to do. The men at Yabesh Gilead decided not to go. The other men decided to go to Mitzpah. Then they decided to have a remorse and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, what we have read in chapters 19, 20, and 21 is a total confusion in the nation of Israel. And this nation was run loosely by tribal lines. And in so doing, never had the chance to execute in unity what they ought to do as a nation. And so, with this, we come to the end of our session today, as well as the end of the book of Judges. And I trust that all of us will have a good understanding of where things went after they left Egypt, entered into the promised land, distributed the land, and lived there throughout the time of the Judges until chapter 21. So may God bless the reading of his words.